Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. Welcome. I'm so excited about this month's theme. We are going to be talking about preparing your kids for future things. So stay tuned. I'm going to be talking to some amazing experts that you won't want to miss. All right. I'm so excited about this month's theme that we've been talking about. We have been interviewing experts on preparing your kids for certain things, and I'm really excited about the topic this month. This week, we're talking about preparing your kids for stress and overwhelm, and I have the most amazing expert coming on, Katrina Siemens from the Deliberate Family. And so welcome, Katrina. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with introductions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and then a little bit about what Deliberate Family is?
Sure. So I am married to my high school sweetheart, and we have 5 kids, ages 16 down to 7. And so we're in the thick of it. We're going all over the place all the time, and I'm pretty much a chauffeur full time, right? And
yes.
I work at my kids' school as a first grade aide. And so I teach over there quite a bit, actually. And then I also run Deliberate Family. So Deliberate Family is all about helping families be more deliberate with Jesus Christ and with the things that they actually care about in their homes, to just be happier, healthier, and have the family that you want, rather than just going with the norm, or like going with just whatever comes your way, right?
Yep.
Whatever happens. And I started Deliberate Family it kind of came about around 2020, like when COVID hit. But before that, my husband and I had actually come up with the name Deliberate Family a while before that. And then it just wasn't the right time. And then I was one day, when COVID hit, everything was shutting down. And the people on Facebook and Instagram were like, we don't know what to do. Our husbands are coming home. Our kids are coming home. Like, I have to homeschool suddenly. What do I do? And my thought was just, they need to know they can do this. They need to know that they have the power and the capability to be able to do whatever they set their minds to do. And the Lord just kind of put an article in my head, and I typed it out, and I told my husband that night, I wrote an article today, and he's like, what are you talking about?
Awesome.
Anyway, I didn't know what to do with it, because I didn't have a website yet. I didn't have Instagram yet. And I was like, okay, well, I have a Facebook page, and I had a blog from like 10 years before. And so I just stuck the article up there, and I just sent it out on Facebook. And I had multiple people reach out to me and say, oh, this made me feel like I can do this. This made me feel less overwhelmed. This made me feel like this won't be as bad as I was imagining it to be.
Yes, that's
and
so cool.
So then it just kind of went from there. So now I created a card deck to help kids be able to recognize their own emotions and be able to not be scared of how they feel. And I love to speak and go and teach, especially at like women's conferences and things like that. So that's what Deliberate Family is.
That's so cool. I love that story. I love that that it started through following revelation. Isn't that so fun? I think we can learn so much from that. If we just act on revelation, not knowing where it's going to go, God can bring us wonderful places. I love that trust you put in him and just went forward with it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to talk today about how parents can help their kids prepare to deal with stress and overwhelm. I feel like this world is not a place of we can protect our kids from stress and overwhelm. Like, that's a given that it's going to happen, right?
Yep.
And we need to be. I'm such an advocate as a therapist of we need to prepare our kids for when they encounter these things, not if they encounter these things, but also not assuming that you can protect them or try to get them to avoid opposition in their life, right?
Absolutely.
And preparing them for that. So, and then we talked about this before, we started, like, if you're listening to this and maybe you're not a parent, right? Or maybe you're a grandparent and you feel like you don't have kids at home and you're like, I'm turning this off because I don't have kids or whatever that might be, right? Listen, because I think that any of these things could apply for any situation you're in. Maybe you're an auntie, maybe you're a grandparent, and you still have influence wherever you're at. Or maybe you are um, a primary teacher, a young women's teacher. Maybe you are a Relief Society teacher teaching other parents. Like, you don't know your sphere of influence, and what you learn today could apply maybe even to yourself, right? Like, we can all use these skills and things like
Right.
that. So
We all feel the stress and the overwhelm, and it's true. You never know who you're talking to or who is listening, and you could share these things with them, and or even just being an example of this is how I deal with stress and overwhelm. Right? Absolutely.
yes. Maybe let's start. I just had this thought, like, maybe let's start with how we see kids not dealing well with stress and overwhelm. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know your kids aren't dealing with stress and overwhelm very well? Or what are some patterns you're seeing that made you want to address this?
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was
Yeah.
kind of on top of my mind too, of like,
Yeah.
okay, let's think about the kids in our lives, especially teenagers. Like, I don't think younger kids also feel stress, but it's a little bit different.
Hmm.
But what kinds of stress are in their lives right now? We could talk about busy schedules. We could talk
Right.
about grades. We could talk about friends. Social peer pressure is huge. Living up to parents and leaders' expectations. Then there's things that are kind of even more out of their control: divorce, um, changing of schools, moving, things like that, where it's not even like a, okay, I have to manage a to-do list or anything like that, but they can also just be feeling the stress of just mortality, right?
Hmm.
Getting an illness, getting being in an accident, like things
Right.
that will just come. And and so all these things can cause stress or cause us to feel overwhelmed. And so, what are some of the coping mechanisms? My thought was talking about what are some of the coping mechanisms that we see these teens um, naturally gravitating to, right?
Yeah.
Um, could be anger, could be isolation, right? I'm
Yeah.
just going to go to my phone. I'm
Yep.
just going to hunker down. I'm not going to talk to anybody.
Yep.
Maybe control. I know sometimes when my teens are feeling overwhelmed or anxious, they start like bossing everybody around. I'm
Yes.
sure I did it
Yes.
as a teen too,
Yep.
right? And we
Yes.
just have to recognize, oh, they're feeling something deeper. How can I help them figure out what's going on so they can move through it instead of getting stuck by it?
Yeah.
I think sometimes the stress can cause them to want to go to screens or anything that feels good, right? So that's often where pornography could come in, or addictions, or even, I mean, food addictions are a huge thing.
Right.
Um, I think it can also be any stimulant. Bullying often can come because of stress and overwhelm,
So
or
true.
hyper focusing and obsessing about something, right? If I just practice harder, it's gonna be so much better. And
Yeah.
instead of letting themselves like breathe for a minute,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I think with all that, like my first tip actually was
Yeah.
learning healthy coping skills.
Yes.
So, so helping them to learn what are these healthy coping skills, like instead of over hyper focusing on practicing more, letting them have breathing room, right?
Mm.
Learning how to slow down, learning how to be still. There's a book that I love, like it's one of my absolute favorite books. I don't know if you've read it. It's called The Power of Stillness.
Love it. Yes, absolutely. It's the
Good
best. Yeah.
book, right? And I
Yes.
remember finding it when COVID came, when
Yeah.
COVID started, and I just listened to it like on repeat all the time. And it was like
Yeah.
mind blowing
Yes.
stuff, right?
Yes. Yes.
And they just talk about how the LDS culture and the LDS faith actually builds stillness in. But sometimes we talk about these things as checklist items rather than times to be still and times to slow down. And
Mhm.
once I read that book, I was like, oh, I could be doing so much more with giving myself room and space to just think and
Yeah.
to do these things, but in a different way, right? So I
Yeah.
highly recommend anybody who's listening read that book. It's on Deseret Bookshelf, and it's also just
It's so good.
you can get it online, Amazon, even I think. So
Yeah. I love
um,
that. So being deliberate or
yeah,
intentional with showing your family these moments of stillness. I love that because I think sometimes I think of my family, we're in 10 different places. Like, when are we all home together anyways? Right? Like,
Right?
everybody has a different schedule. And the one time I'm trying to schedule is dinner when everybody's
Yeah.
home, you know? And
Right.
so just building in these intentional times of stillness, or teaching them that that can be their coping skill of being deliberate.
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely. And even just this past conference, was Elder Bednar, I believe, talked about this
he
stillness
did.
idea. Like,
Yes.
don't keep pushing harder, slow
Yeah.
down, give yourself a minute.
Yes.
And, another part of that, it would be breathing, right? Breathing
Right.
exercises are often, I have a 10-year-old who gets kind of anxious about time.
Yeah.
And we've been for a long time helping him with breathing exercises to be able to just cope, right? Be
Yep.
able to just come back to his brain and not be in the fight or flight mode, but be able to
Yep.
just pursue, keep on going at a steady pace. So, um,
Yeah.
other thoughts I had about like healthy coping skills is positive activities. So sometimes, like my kids, when they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, like they'll want to turn on a video game or something, and it's like, hey, can I jump in and do that with you? Or can
Yeah.
I, there's a way to turn these things that they naturally draw to and make it more of a positive experience rather
Mm.
than something that could just be isolating or something that's just like frustrating, right? Because
Yeah.
video games, my son loves them, but if he loses every time, he's not going to love them so much, and it's not helping with the stress level either, right?
Yes.
It's
Right. Right.
backfiring. Anyway,
Yes.
um,
Yeah. I love that. So
and
learning skills to regulate their emotions, their body, how they're reacting, things like that.
yeah, yeah. So I'll just list off a couple others
Yeah.
that I thought
Yeah.
of, and we can go to the next tip.
Yeah.
Does that
No, you're
work?
good. Yeah.
Um, Talking, like not being afraid to ask for help. I've had to coach my teens to say, hey, it's okay to ask me for help. Or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I have to be intuitive as a parent to notice, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's also preparing myself to know they are going to feel stressed and it's okay. But
Yeah.
how can I reach out to them or help them know it's okay to ask me for help, that they can come and talk to me about
Yeah.
anything? We have a phrase in our family that's no topic is taboo, and it just means they can come and ask me anything. And I mean, it always happens at like midnight, and you're
Right.
like,
That's when
I'm
kids
so
want to talk.
tired,
I know. Right.
right? I told them you can talk to me about anything, anytime, right?
Yeah.
Journaling, prayer, meditation, exercise. Now,
Yeah.
exercise has never been my strong suit or my like favorite thing to do. Like,
Yes. Right.
I
Yeah.
have had to learn, but I know that exercise, just moving your body, can clear your mind so fast and rejuvenate that energy to say, I got this.
Right.
And so if these kids are like, oh, I'm just gonna sit because I just feel too tired and overwhelmed, it's like, oh, let's just go for a walk. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how can we just like, get you moving so that
Yeah.
it's not hard, but that it just reignites those things in your brain?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And coping skills are kind of that connotation that you are going to need to cope with something, right? So we need to develop these skills for these inevitable hard times of stress and overwhelm. And so teaching our kids these skills before they happen, because it's a whole lot harder to learn a skill when you're
When
already
you're
stressed
stressed,
and overwhelmed, right? I
right?
was telling clients that I'm like, like, don't wait to put this in action and practice it when it's happening, because you will feel overwhelmed and think the skill doesn't work. And you're like, practicing for the marathon on race day. That's not
Yes.
helpful.
That's
Like,
not gonna help
let's,
so much.
yeah, let's practice before race day, and practicing these things, and just maybe thinking of one of those things that your family could implement or start doing as some. I love that you get like jump in and do it with them, right? Like, help
Right.
them start seeing that. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, so you talking about doing things beforehand actually kind of went to my next
Oh, cool.
thought. My
Yeah.
next tip was talking about it and eliminating the fear of stress. So
Ah,
sometimes as human beings, we want everything to be comfortable, right?
yeah.
We want everything to feel good. Because
Yes.
it's not fun to be stressed. It's not
Yeah.
fun to feel overwhelmed. It's
Hmm.
not fun to feel sad,
Yep.
right? But God gave us all of these things to give us a full human experience, right?
Right.
So if we are afraid of feeling stressed, or we are trying to avoid it at all costs, we are missing out.
Right.
And so my thought is eliminating that fear means we got to talk about it,
Yeah.
right? We've got to be having these conversations in our house about, you know what? Yep, I feel stressed sometimes. Being able to go to my kids and say, I'm really sorry. I lost my cool because I'm feeling super stressed and overwhelmed right now. Can you actually help me with this part? Do you know what I mean? Being able
Yep.
to
Exactly.
come to them in your stress, but then also being able to talk to them about what stress they could feel.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, like let's
Mhm.
prepare them beforehand and then keep talking during. And guess what? If you've talked enough about it beforehand, it doesn't feel weird to talk about it
Yeah.
during, right?
It's not one of those let's sit down and have a talk moments where you're like,
Right?
oh dear.
Like all of us
It's-
are like, oh, please no.
yes. Yeah. It's just a natural
Right?
everyday conversation that
Right.
happens.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
on the good times, let's talk. I mean, my husband will even sometimes just take one of our boys out and just walk around. We live across the street from a park, and he'll just walk the park with them, whether it's a good day or a bad day. So that then when it is a
Yeah.
bad day, it doesn't feel weird and it's not like, ooh, I don't know what to say. It's like, oh yeah, I've done this with dad tons of times. So now
Yes.
it helps to stress relief. It's that exercise coping mechanism. It's talking about the stress so we're not afraid of it and seeing that we can
Yeah.
actually do something about it.
And I love that developing that relationship to be able to talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are those strategies that you're doing so that talking about stress is comfortable and safe in that environment and
Mm-hmm.
helping kids feel like they can talk about their stress without feeling like it's going to come back and be, we'll just do this and be done
Right.
with it, right?
Just solved or just looked at differently, like not being heard, right? Like
Yes.
having that relationship between parents and children or even leaders and children. We live in a ward that's just amazing youth leaders who are just there to just like listen to the kids anytime, and the kids know they can call them up. Like my daughter calls up her young women's president multiple times a month and says, "Hey, I'm stranded at the school. Can you come get me?"
Oh, that's awesome that
But
she has
it's
that
because they've
relationship.
created that relationship with
Yep.
them beforehand so that when it's a moment, they know that they can be somebody to turn to.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And just getting it out, being able to get it out. I teach
Mhm.
it as like the volcano effect. Like if you keep that stress in, you're going to build the pressure and it's going to explode somewhere. So what are we doing to release that? And being able to talk about
Yeah.
that stress is so healthy.
Yep. Yep. And I think it's easier to talk about if we're not scared of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. Well, yeah, that's the other thing I was thinking about is that opposition that you talked about at the beginning of that is we need to feel those opposing emotions. We need to
Mhm.
feel like stress isn't a bad thing. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean something's gone wrong or that we're doing something wrong. Like that is what helps us feel accomplishment, right? Like when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to feel the opposite of that and that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I thought of in that is
Yeah.
that the kids also can realize everybody feels this, right? So
Yes.
then they aren't feeling, so when they even recognize their friends feeling it, they can help them be able to know how to deal with it too and not be afraid of it, but to feel like I know how to do this. I can handle this.
Yes.
I have this for a reason, right? I am in control. And
Mhm.
maybe control is not quite the right word, but this idea, I think sometimes,
Have
we
choice.
think we're the only ones who
Hmm.
feel this way. And it's like, no, then
Yes.
look how much you could minister to each other, to minister to your friends,
Yeah.
to let them help them in their time of need. And then they can help you in your time of need too, right?
Yeah. That's
So
so interesting. I was thinking about that just I think yesterday when I was thinking about ministering, like, what if we all just put out there what we needed help with? Right? Like,
seriously,
what do you
it's
think could
true.
get done rather than just sitting? I think so many times, what can I do for my ministering sister? What can I do to show her I love her, that I care, that I'm actually ministering? And I think I spend so much time doing that rather than just like being able to know exactly what they need. Right?
Right.
And
And
what if I just told people
sometimes
what I needed?
as the minister, it's like, okay, I should just ask, right?
Yeah.
But at
Yep.
the same time, like, okay, let's turn that around and maybe I should be telling my ministering sister
Yes.
more of what I need, right?
Yeah.
And being open and vulnerable and being like, and recognizing that, because my husband will sometimes say, well, wouldn't you? immediately go and help them if they came to you with that problem? And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we should turn it around and be able to say to them, I need help with this, and not
Hmm.
feel shame or guilt about it, and just say, this is just how it is and it's
Yeah.
okay. Right.
And that's that part of that normalizing, right? As parents, like normalizing stress is okay. It's okay to ask for help and talk about it.
Mhm.
And we can like be an example and a model of that
Yeah.
for our
Yeah.
kiddos.
I love it. I love it.
Very cool. Awesome. Okay. What's our
Okay.
third tip for dealing with
Okay.
stress and overwhelm?
Third tip comes from a quote from President Nelson.
Yeah.
So in 2012, Tad Collister gave a BYU speech called Our Identity and Our Destiny.
Ooh.
And in it, he quoted President Nelson. He said it was at a training session for general authorities, and somebody asked President Nelson, what can we do to help those struggling with pornography? And President Nelson said, teach them their identity and their purpose. And
Uh,
Elder Collister said, it just stuck with me. And he said, not because necessarily with what happened in that meeting or anything, but because I think that answer can be helpful for any challenge that we face.
mm,
And the reality is, especially for our teens and our children, they are constantly fighting that question, who am I?
yep.
What am I doing here? What good do I do? What purpose do I have? They're constantly looking for those answers, and they don't even know it really.
Yeah.
So if we can continuously, before the stress happens, teach them their identity and their purpose over and over and over again, so that it is you feel like a broken record, but you are telling them you are a child of God. You have power. You have made covenants through
Mm.
baptism, which means that you have access to the Holy Ghost and to God's power. Like, and
Yes.
reaffirming those things. Then when the stress comes, then you sit in the stress with them and you keep helping them remember who they are, and
Yeah.
remember what they can do, and remember what God trusts them to do, and that He is with them, and they don't have to do it by themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to have that testimony. And I feel like this last conference, even a couple of people even made mention of, teach them their identity and their purpose. If we
Yeah.
know our identity, we don't have to worry about anything else, right? Like it lights a spark in our spirits, I think, because we know it to be true down to our core. And
Yeah.
so if we can keep on using language like that and teaching that to our kids and reminding them in those moments, it's like, I know this isn't solving the problem,
Yeah.
but I have confidence in you, and so does the Lord. And that is a big deal. And that's something to not forget.
And that you have a teammate on your side, right? Like
Yeah.
that's more powerful than anybody on this planet. You have the savior on your side. That's part of your identity. I love
Yes.
that. That's so cool. I was kind of hearing that in conference too, because it resonated with me. I work on the Navajo reservation. So I'm a mental health therapist on the Navajo reservation, and we work closely with traditional counselors who teach healing through traditional cultural perspectives. And one of the things that my mentor was teaching me about the most powerful and effective thing you can do in traditional counseling is remind them of their four clans and bring them back to their identity. And
Mhm.
that is the healing practice of traditional counseling. And so, because when you teach them about their four clans that come from their grandparents, right? Like
Mhm.
who are your grandparents? Where do they come from? And what's their clan? And it's kind of like our patriarchal blessings. Like we have a tribe, right? And we
Mhm.
learn about that tribe, and that's our identity. And we have those powers and things like that. And I can't tell you how many times like they have one session with somebody and remind them of their clans and where they came from and what a shift happens in their life. And every time I just think, oh my gosh, my patriarchal blessing, I'm a child of God. Like that is the teachings we believe as well in how powerful that can be. And what if we could have one session to remind ourselves of that, right? Or general conference, right? One
Right.
talk that reminds us of how much power we have in our identity as a
Right.
child of God.
Absolutely. That's so cool. That is so cool. Yeah, exactly. And I think that we can trust our children to have that same experience, right? Like they don't need to be full grown to know I am a child of God. There's a
Yeah.
reason we teach it in sunbeams, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
that's the reality, and that's a truth that we can hold to our core, and that can drive us and motivate us to do things we never thought we would be able to do.
So
And
true.
we know who we are, and then we know that the Lord has purpose for us, and we move forward in that purpose. And as teenagers, it might be your purpose right now is to learn as much as you can. Your
Yeah.
purpose right now is to get to know the Savior on your own, and to build your own testimony. So what can you do to keep doing that, even if when you have moments of feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed? And if they can keep their focus on that, then it will all work out. It will all
Yeah.
feel okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's huge. I was just thinking like, well, I can think of like 3 or 4 talks that talked about this just at this
Right.
last journal conference. I'm thinking someone talked about meaning and purpose. Like we
Yep.
need to know our meaning and purpose and our identity. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, I think it was Sister Dennis talked about um, finding meaning in things. Like the more that you understand them and the layers of that, like how powerful they are. Think about all the layers in the meaning of your identity as I am a child of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Absolutely.
how much that could change your life if you really looked into and sought and really tried to understand what's that meaning and purpose
What does that
in that
mean?
identity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. I heard a patriarch say once that we need to remember that our children are full grown spirits when they come to earth.
Ooh,
And it hit me hard because it's like, yeah, like sometimes we get so wrapped up in, oh, they're kids, they've got to figure this out, or they're not ready for this yet, or whatever. But the reality is we were all full grown spirits before we came and got a body, and we needed the next step. And our privilege as parents and leaders is to help these children remember who they are and what they're doing here, and then everything is okay. And remember how, and rekindle that relationship with Jesus Christ that I am positive we had before,
yeah,
and be able to rely on that more every single day,
yeah.
because then they'll be okay.
Yes. I love that. I love these tips. These are so cool. So cool because I think that each of these tips have so much embedded in them. Like we could sit here and unpack
We
each of
could
these
talk
for
forever,
so
right?
long. Like these are so powerful. These are powerful things because stress and overwhelm can be something that can be a force in our life the other direction, right? Like it can be something that, you can feel like you're just a tumbleweed being tossed in the wind, right? That it can just take you away. But if we can fortify ourselves on the other end with these and these tips, that we can be a really strong oak tree in this
Mhm.
wind, right? Of stress and overwhelm that's coming. And so many prophets have told us that it's just going to get worse, right? Like
Yep.
if we think we're stressed now and overwhelmed now, like think 10
Just
years
wait for
ago,
it,
right?
right?
Like what's happening in 10 more years? Like what is this
Right.
going to be like? And so what are we doing to prepare now and prepare our kids for when they're encountering this stress and overwhelm and
Yeah.
helping them. And I always just say like the best way to teach your kids is do it yourself first. Figure these things out yourself first. Are you applying them to your life? And are you doing these things? And maybe that's kind of the first layer to look at this. Like, do you have coping skills in your life that you are
Mhm.
using? Are you looking at what your identity, meaning, and purpose are? And, are you really talking about your stress and helping people to asking for that help yourself and finding those safe, comfortable places. And are you fearful of stress
Right.
yourself? Because you
Right.
can tell your kids all day long, don't be fearful of stress. But if you're showing them that you are, that
Right.
that mismatch is going to show up for them in
Absolutely.
that.
And we really do watch to learn more than we listen to learn. And so the kids are going to just see what they see. And if they will see you studying about your identity and your purpose. They will see you talking about it and being excited about it. They'll see you being afraid of stress, or being humble in stress and being able to talk about it and not be scared of it, right?
Mhm.
They will watch you. I mean, when we're little, that when toddlers are learning to walk, they walk because they see other people walking, right? So
Yeah.
we can't sit here and just lecture. It doesn't work. And
Yeah.
yeah,
You didn't lecture your toddler into walking.
it's yeah, not happening, right? But if I stopped walking, they wouldn't walk. But
Right.
if I keep walking, they're going to want to do it because they see it happening over and over and over again. And that is how our brains work. So we have to, I love that. We have to be doing it. Even if you feel like it's behind closed doors, right? They'll feel it and they'll see it. You never know
They'll see
what they're
that shift in
seeing,
you. Uh-huh.
right? They'll
Hmm.
see they'll see it. Yep.
Yeah. I love that. I love these tips. These are so good. These are amazing. So if people want to find you and want to learn more about you and tell them about your emotion cards, those are so cool and where they can find those.
Oh, I wish I had a deck with me right here, but that's okay. So the cards are called Just Talk. And the idea is, if you can't tell from everything else we've already talked about, I
Yeah,
love
sure.
talking. I love conversations. Like
Yeah.
my husband and I just think it all comes back to conversations in families that can take your family one way or another, right?
Yeah.
So it's called Just Talk, and it's just 52 emotion words on cards, and they're categorized into different colors. And the idea is you can use them in so many different ways, but the idea that the main way we use them is to sit down with a child who's feeling stuck or just doesn't, the silent treatment from
Yeah.
teenagers, right? And we just say, hey, tell me how you're feeling, like, and we just lay cards out in front of them and they can just touch them, and it kind of
So cool.
creates the vocabulary for them and go, ooh, I think that's what I'm feeling. And then it opens up ways to talk about what they're feeling and why, and it trains parents to be better listeners and to give this space, and then
Yeah.
for kids to be able to recognize their own emotions and be able to see that they have control over them, and that
Yeah.
it's okay to feel all the feelings. So
Yes. There's so much packed in those cards. I can't even tell you like how many skills are like basic skills that therapists teach packed in your little cards there. Like those are amazing. Just naming and vocabulary and talking about emotions and understanding emotions. Like there's so much in that.
I love it. Well, and that's why I say, like, they could be used so many different
So
ways.
many
Like, we
ways.
even had kids pull them out and when they can't even read yet, but then it's just opening up, hey, look, this word says happy. When have you felt happy before? Or this word says frustrated. When have you felt frustrated before? So
Yep.
they're just getting that emotional knowledge and that emotional vocabulary building from the start, and then, yeah, so on and so forth. So,
They're
yeah.
so cool. They're so cool. I
Um,
was telling Katrina before we got on that I was like, I need to get these for the therapists I work with that go out in the schools. I'm like, they're always looking for things like that. They're amazing.
I would love to send you a deck. That would be
Yes.
so cool. So,
Yeah. Very cool.
yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Deliberate Family, and then deliberateFamily.com is my website. And then there, like, the cards are linked there, and also a bunch of free resources I have for families are there. So I have a toolbox, a Deliberate Family Toolbox is what it's called. And it's just a bunch of PDFs that could help you in your home to be more deliberate at home. So
That's so cool. I'll link them all in the show notes for you guys. So I'll
great.
link her website and I clicked on it. It's super easy. It has the toolbox there, has the cards there, has everything. So I'll put that link on there for you guys. Definitely go follow Katrina. She's got some amazing ideas on there. Get the skills deck card. I can't tell you how this will change. This, you could use that with all the skills that we just talked about. They're so cool. And yeah, check everything out she has. It's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Nikki. This has
Yeah.
been so fun to just sit and chat with you about
Yeah.
one of
Thanks.
my favorite topics.
Yes. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. It's been amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.